But sometimes I meet people in Kentucky, and I'm like, you might have killed the guy.
So
I'm just saying, I was here like...
I totally agree.
Week 2, I'm here, and I'm hearing stories about people's family members murdering other people. Like, week 2 on the farm, and I'm just like, no one was a murderer in that in that circle of people. But adjacent to these people, there was more than a handful. It wasn't just like one, it was like multiple people saying, yeah, I know a guy who did, and so stuff like that's like, yeah, I might need to carry a gun more often here. People are, I'm being 100% honest. Like, that is a conversation. Like, one of the guys was talking about it. It's just... All right, go for it.
Welcome back to another episode of the Agriculture Podcast, and today we're driving back from the Kentucky Commodity Conference. I got Clayton in the truck with me, and we've been up there all day being advocates for agriculture in the Kentucky Conference, actually just visiting and networking and listening to a few interesting speakers, and just a full day of agriculture. And what do you think about today, Clayton?
It's way more at a local level than I feel like I should be involved at, especially as someone who doesn't live in the state. But I find that stuff interesting. So I am not a member of like Iowa Soy or Iowa Corn or anything like that. I've thought about joining, but it's just like after, I pay dues or whatever, it's like, I don't even grow this stuff. Like it would purely be paying for access to a network, which I just don't think that's, I would feel unintegral doing that, especially as someone who does. Oh my gosh, you guys dump salt on your roads here. We just drove by a salt truck, but you guys, that's too much salt. I don't know if I'm from Iowa. That's too much. Like that's a waste.
He's dumping his whole load out.
I thought it was snow on the road. Anyways, I thought it was pretty interesting. I don't listen to too much of the grain marketing talk. But it has been, I talked about this on my podcast right before this. Brazil has been a constant conversation in all the grain market talks recently. If you're listening to anyone talking about grain, they're talking about Brazil in some factor, just because they are such a huge exporter of soybeans and corn and now cotton. And now Argentina is apparently coming into the question. Argentina is also growing a ton of stuff and exporting a ton of things. So all that stuff is interesting to me. Let's see. Got to hang out with your buddy Brandon. He was on the podcast last week when you guys are listening to this. Pretty interesting. Seems like a fun fellow. Seems like the type of guy that would be really fun to go on a week-long hunting trip with.
Or, he's an interesting fella.
That'd be a fun one to spend like a week out at his farm during planting season or something. That might be fun. But other than that, it was good. I sat on my laptop and got a lot of work done while I was listening to things or waiting for Neil.
So we were at FarmCon about a week ago, and the difference in FarmCon and like a state level conference like what we were at today is FarmCon, you're bringing out you're a really high level thinker from all around the country into one venue, and Kentucky has a lot of great advocates and a lot of great farmers and ag businessmen. But it's a different feel than what you're going to get at AgCon or what you're going to get at the National Farm Machine Show or the Commodity Classic. It's a much more, Kentucky farmers are a pretty small group. The people that attend this conference usually attend it every year, so we're a fairly tight-knit group. We all know each other, and it's just a different feel than what you'd get at FarmCon. We don't get as many vendors there as like what FarmCon would have or the National Farm Machine Show. They're mostly local. And for Clayton, who is, I call him now, he's semi-native Kentuckian because he's spending a couple times a month down here. And it seems like we're always on some kind of mission to go somewhere. So he is a semi-native Kentuckian. We're going to try to steal him out of Iowa at some point.
You're not convincing Laura of that anytime soon.
Laura would come if. All right, so Laura is Clayton's wife, and She hasn't been to Kentucky yet, but we're trying to get her down there, and I think
she's going to come week of Farm Machine Show.
Okay, so Laura's coming to the Farm Machine Show week. I think if we can ever get her in Kentucky, she might love it.
I don't know, man. She really likes Iowa.
I'm
still fixing for Montana.
Okay, so for all you Iowa guys, and I know there's more farmers and more ag businessmen in Iowa than in Kentucky. What advantages does Iowa have on Kentucky?
If you own land, you are a wealthy man. If you grow corn, you grow good corn. If you like farming in squares, it's really easy to farm in squares. This is kind of like bashing Iowa a little bit. Real talk, we do have agriculture is the absolute powerhouse of Iowa. The cities, it doesn't feel that way, but the moment you step anywhere outside of any city, I mean, that state is run by agriculture. I mean, it makes up a large percentage of the jobs in our state, because even if you're not a farmer, you are working for some form of co-op, some sort of ag business that's based out of there. I mean, Des Moines has a ton of headquarters for ag businesses. We have Iowa State, which is like a world-class agriculture college. USDA's got a facility right down the road from them. They're doing tons of crazy research there. We also get really good, we have the perfect amount of rainfall to...
Hold on now. I'm talking about, okay, you're telling me why Iowa is a better corn state than Kentucky.
Well, obviously.
And I will agree with that wholeheartedly. A better farming state, but are you better culturally than Kentucky?
So I grew up in California. Everything's pretty much a step up culture-wise when you leave that state, just as far as like people being nice to you and having conversations. I think people are actually genuinely nicer in Kentucky. The Midwest nice is very strong in Iowa. You will always get courteous conversation from people. They might not actually give a rip about who you are sometimes.
So
other than that,
are you saying, do you think Kentucky has nicer people than Iowa as a whole? I'm not talking about individuals. I'm just talking about if you went to a conference in Iowa, would it be as easy to talk to people as you've experienced as it is in Kentucky?
Yes, but sometimes I meet people in Kentucky and I'm like, you might have killed the guy.
So
I'm just saying, I was here like...
I totally agree.
Week 2, I'm here, and I'm hearing stories about people's family members murdering other people. Like week 2 on the farm, and I'm just like, no one was a murderer in that circle of people. But adjacent to these people, there was more than a handful. It wasn't just like one. It was like multiple people saying, yeah, I know a guy who did. And so stuff like that's like, yeah, I might need to carry a gun more often here. People are... I'm being 100% honest. Like, that is a conversation. Like, one of the guys was talking about it. It's just...
No, I totally agree. Like, you're going to come into Kentucky and you're going to be like, look at, there's a percentage of our state's population that you're looking at and you're like, what does that guy have going on? That's just part of Kentucky. Okay, so now we've talked about the people a little bit. Talk about, like when you're just out and about in your travels throughout Kentucky. I mean, it's a beautiful state. Like, yeah. We have topography and we have a lot of beautiful, like, architecture and buildings and history. And do you see Iowa as being similar to that, or better than that, worse than that?
Most of Iowa, no. Northeast Iowa, where I used to farm, is gorgeous, like especially fall when the leaves start to change. I mean, one of my favorite memories is driving the combine, or driving the grain cart behind the combine as we're opening up the edges of a field next to like this tree line. Like, to this day, some of the prettiest things I've ever seen have been on this one farm in Iowa. Like beautiful canyons and creeks running through it, beautiful cow pastures that you wouldn't know exist there. Kind of northeast Iowa, starting to get closer to Wisconsin. With all of that said, I lived in Montana long enough to say that nothing in the Midwest really compares to like staring at a mountain range like that, or like...
Hold on, I totally agree. Like, we're both in the same
I'm saying
train of thought here that the West is the most beautiful in our country. What I'm trying to compare now is the ability of a woman to live in Iowa, in Moline, or that area you're in, the Quad Cities.
You know,
versus...
Laura's going to listen. Laura does not listen to any of this. She's going to listen to this one for sure, and she's not going to move.
She might. If she ever came to Kentucky, she might be like, that is the most beautiful state I've ever been in, sans Idaho and Washington.
My wife is comforted by cornfields. Like, she likes being able to see that far on a flat ground. Like, it's comforting to some people. Also, she's made it clear to me that living within 10 to 15 minutes of Walmart and Chick-fil-A are pretty important to where we live. So when I say I want to move to Montana one day and live an hour and a half from Walmart, like, doesn't go over very well. You get used to it, guys. If you've never lived that far away from a Walmart, I spend so much less or more money now that I live in a city close to grocery stores. Anyways, all that to say is, I don't think she would move. She likes Iowa too much. Her parents live too close. The rest of her family lives too close. If we're moving somewhere, we got to get far enough away from the Midwest for it to be worth it.
We'll just bring the whole family to Kentucky.
Nah, that's not going to happen.
No, I mean...
when I build our portable studio that I have built in a shipping container, it's attached to a 40-foot gooseneck trailer that, can be moved within a few hours. Maybe it'd be like, oh, I've spent a week here with the family sort of thing, but no one wants to live in a shipping container. I just don't want to, it's humid. You guys don't get enough snow for me. I do like plowing snow.
You're not going to see much snow in our western end of the state. We do have a little dust right now, but generally overall, my area, Kentucky, and we're very far west and pretty far south, experience a couple inches of snow a year. Most of the time it's a dust or less. And to be honest, if we get winter precipitation, it's usually freezing rain.
Uh-huh. And your entire state shuts down.
Yes, the entire state cannot stand. We have no infrastructure for winter weather, or at least on my western end. We cannot tolerate winter weather. And people are going to drive right into the ditch as soon as we have it. So, yeah, that, Kentucky is it's a very interesting state, and I don't know why Laura wouldn't want to see double wides with another camper pulled up beside it.
So you just said it right there. If I was going to own farmland, Kentucky is on the table compared to Iowa land prices. Like, I was talking to a guy today, I was saying, yeah, our land prices in Kentucky are getting pretty high, and I live like 30 minutes from some of the highest land prices in the country right now. And I just, anytime it's like, yeah, we're up to like 11,000 an acre, I'm just like, it's just like, I think we had like a 36,000 acre farm sell like 30 minutes away last year. It's just like $36,000 an acre for farmland. Like, you can't make money on that at that point. For my business also, being in Iowa is very strategic in the sense it's like, okay, within 4 hours I can reach 4 Midwest states that all are heavily reliant on agriculture. I have Des Moines, an hour and a half, 2 hours away. I have Ames with Iowa State, also an hour and a half, 2 hours away. I live in Waterloo, Cedar Falls. Whether I like it or not, John Deere is there, and that brings in a lot of other businesses and companies. Moline's not too far away. Caterpillar's not too far away. Tons of manufacturing in Iowa. Lots of like aftermarket parts manufacturers based out. Like, Iowa is still a very strong manufacturing state. People don't talk about that a lot, but you drive through some of these small towns and you just see this massive warehouse that has like 60 cars pulled up. It's like, oh, this factory employs half of this town because they're producing this one product for this certain industry. And so it's a very strategic place for at least the Midwest division of the business now. If we ever did a Western division, it would be probably Montana or Idaho or something like that.
Sure.
Kentucky just doesn't fit into my map. If I roll out a map on my floor, unless I was shipping cargo, I don't think I really need to live here.
I love to promote my state, and I love.
I know we were just at a meeting with 100 other people, all who agree with you.
Yeah, we love Kentucky, and we love to talk about how much we love Kentucky. But no, I know it. like you're logistically situated perfect for your business. And this is the one thing about Kentucky that, you know, is a little bit of a hindrance, is especially in my western, like we're surrounded by 4 rivers, so we only have certain points of entry in and out of our geographical area, and we have a very small area, you know, so not a lot of shopping, not a lot of things to do, and you got to travel outside of that area to get into, you know, other opportunities at shopping or other industries, and you know it can be a problem. So yeah,
that's
it's just
any rural area though.
Yeah.
With that said, sometimes I drive over those bridges and I'm just like, man, for how critical this is to some of the infrastructure in this state, it looks a little old.
Oh, like our Ohio River Bridge that crosses over to Cairo, Illinois, and we cross it every day on our semis. I mean, the bridge literally looks like it could fall in any day, and I totally believe that, you know, one day one of our trucks are going to pull up to the bridge and the bridge deck is going to be gone. I mean, it is a matter of time before it falls in the river. All it would take is you know, they keep saying that our area is going to experience a major earthquake. Well, it wouldn't take a major one to knock that one into the river. I feel like at any moment a barge can hit it, and you know, a couple times a year it usually does hit the bridge, and the bridge is just going to fall like a stack of dominoes.
Well, the other one's been down for maintenance for a while.
Yeah,
right?
okay,
Missouri.
so right there in our area we have one that crosses the Ohio, and then you jump across the river from the Kentucky to the Illinois side, and it leapfrogs the Mississippi River, you know, on a bridge to Missouri. So that is equally in as bad or worse a shape. Matter of fact, when I take my wife and kids across it, they close their eyes and try not to look or hear because it looks so scary. So yeah, we do have a lot of things going for our state. We also have some, you know, we have some problems in our state too.
That's every state though.
Yeah, that's every state. I mean,
know, when they passed that last infrastructure bill through Congress, you know what I immediately went and did? I immediately went and invested in a index fund full of infrastructure companies. I was like, everything in the U.S. is falling apart. At some point, they will fix that bridge, and hopefully, at some point, I will make some sort of return on that. Because I was just like, that's a criticism that I see on the internet that sometimes like, oh, that's blown out of proportion. That the media is like, oh, our infrastructure is falling apart, or like other countries like, oh, the U.S.'s infrastructures can't handle it. That's one of those things I travel enough to vouch for, is like, our infrastructure for how big our country is has held together phenomenally well. With that said, we could definitely use some scheduled maintenance on a lot of the U.S.'s bridges, roads, and highways. We'll get there, but it's a lot. There's a lot of concrete out there that we've poured over the past 100 years, and it needs some help. It
is like those bridges, they're in dire need of maintenance. And you know, it's more than just you can band-aid in a little summer project or whatever. You know, that bridge, the Ohio River Bridge, is getting so much traffic that in the next 5 years, it is going to have to be replaced. And I'm sure that's not the only one, you know, along the Ohio River that needs to be replaced.
But yeah, those projects take like my wife's family, her dad's from Canada, so we go visit her dad's side of the family usually once a year. And so if you're driving up through Detroit to go over their one bridge there, they've been building the adjacent bridge to open more shipping lanes for like 6 or 7 years now, and it's still this super critical, like, shipping between U.S. and Canada, like right there is a super critical point in like our U.S. infrastructure, especially like moving transit across borders. Like, that's a big deal, and it has taken them so long to finish that other bridge, just so the other one can even have some more like, there was at one point where there was a 1-lane bridge moment on that bridge. It was like, man, this is like crazy that like something this important.
Yeah, a key point of the entry like that is down to 1 lane.
Down to 1 lane. Oh, it's crazy. It's really fascinating, and it is a marvel to look at how, like, at least mile wise, how wide the U.S. is, and how much infrastructure we have built on that. It is a testament to human engineering and the mechanical engineering that went behind all the machines we used to build, like the U.S. road system. Guys, this country takes like, I bet it's probably 45 hours to drive across from one side to the other, going like 70, 80 miles an hour. Guys, imagine how long it took to carve the place, like the area to build those roads in. Oh my, it's
just driving through the states of like, well, we were talking about this earlier, like if you're driving through Colorado or Idaho or Montana or Wyoming and you're crossing all these mountain passes and all these difficult like elevations, the amount of strategic development that it's took to carve these roads across, I mean, it's unbelievable feat. And I think that's a testament to the success of America is, like our infrastructure is one of the things that sets us apart versus the other countries of the world.
Yeah.
It's just we have such a phenomenal level of infrastructure.
You look at, so China has been a major investor in third world countries, or not even investor, lender. They lend a lot of money to developing countries because China has made a lot of money, but now that's biting them in the butt. Anyways, China about 15, 20 years ago, and even now, has spent a ton of money building the same things we built 60, 70 years ago. Really good roads, really good highways, rail lines, places to move stuff in between, investing in ports so they can export more things. And that has just absolutely skyrocketed their economy because now all these goods that are produced now have access to wider markets. And that is something that, like, if you're a developing country, most economists will look at a developing country and say, if that government would dump a couple $1 billion into infrastructure, it would return X amount of dollars on building that infrastructure, and they would make it back in taxes in X amount of years. And that's what the U.S. did. Like, that was kind of, going back to the Great Depression we were talking about in my podcast an hour ago. One of the things FDR did was say, well, let's start building some roads. Let's pour some of this government money back into our country to make more tax dollars to give people jobs and stimulate the economy. And that's exactly what it did. We poured a bunch of money into building these roads and these highways to connect a bunch of people, to move more goods, to move money around, to stimulate the economy, and for the government to eventually make that money back they spent on roads in taxes. And that's the whole goal behind it. But, looking at a country the size of the U.S., how many millions of miles of roads we have, it just takes a lot of time to do stuff like that. And I know Africa as a continent in general has been investing probably trillions into roads, because Africa's going to be that next continent that's just going to skyrocket in productivity in the next 2 decades. And they know, hey, we're going to start producing more goods, we're going to have a larger economy. What do we need to do to support that economy? Build places to move all that stuff.
Yeah, ultimately, if you can't move the product you're producing, then what good is the product? I mean, we have to have our critical infrastructure, as in roads and rail and airports and ports, water ports, to be able to get those goods to market fast and efficient. And because ultimately, if you don't, the transportation cost of the good, eats up all the profit margin. Mm-hmm. So, it's key that we begin to address some of these deficiencies that we're seeing in our infrastructure now, just from lack of maintenance.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy how reliant the world is on hard goods and shipping. Like, I think if one thing, like when that ship got stuck in the Suez Canal 2 years ago, I think that was and COVID too. It's just like, oh man, that infrastructure stops moving, the world halts. Everything just is like.
It was. I mean, it was weeks before they got the backlog of ships back through there again.
It cost the world economy billions upon billions of dollars because something couldn't move. That was it. All it was stuck, and ships couldn't get through this major shipping lane. It is.
One of the big problems right now in the world economy is you've got the Houthis that are lobbing bombs at the ships coming through the Red Sea. Well, The alternative to that is to sail around the entire coast of Africa, to get access to that side of the world. So if you don't want your ship that's holding $100 billion in goods to get a missile lobbed at them, you've got, what did that, I think we heard today that just one of those ships incurred an extra $10 million in shipping cost.
Oh, yeah.
Just one. I was floored by that.
I was watching a video the other night. This guy committed insurance fraud on $100 million oil tankers. This thing cost $100 million to build, and at that same time was hauling $100 million worth of crude oil in it. That's $200 million just floating around in the ocean that some guy wanted an insurance claim for, and so he had it lit on fire. It's crazy. Like, it's just like, that's just the crazy. You think about how, if you guys have ever been to the ocean, you probably have seen how big one of those ships are at some point. If you haven't, they are huge, like 3 to 4 football field size ships.
If you hadn't, you should take and go to one of our, our ports and take a look at those super packs. They are something to see. I mean, if you're around that Mobile, like the Mobile Bay in Alabama, you can see a lot of oil and stuff leaving the ports. And the ships that are out on the horizon, I mean, they're you can't imagine the size of these
things. If you want to think about how insignificant you are in the grand scheme of the world, go stand next to one of those ships and understand that one of those ships carries like 1,000 lifetimes worth of product and revenue that like most human beings will ever like come close to touching in their entire life. It's just crazy how big they really are.
It really is, and it just goes to show you how big our world is. Like you get focused on your little part of the world or geography that you're in, and you don't realize how vast and how many people are in our world. Like our country is big, but you go to China or to India or to one of these other countries, and their populations are 10 times what ours is. And so that requires 10 times the amount of goods that a country like ours needs. So it is mind-blowing how big a world we live in.
And testifies to the world superpower the U.S. government has become, because somehow out of all that we have generated the most revenue as a country ever, and somehow have managed to keep a population of 330 million people relatively well-fed for 100 years now. It's crazy. It's wild.
And I think a big part of our success, not only in our infrastructure, but just in our country as a whole, is the ability to keep the country, well-fed and powered through energy in our homes and our cars, with, really easy access to the things we need to operate in a day-to-day situation.
Yeah.
It gives us a lot of stability. And with that stability, when people are fed and and they're comfortable, then they can be, they're more apt to go out and start business, and they're further in society because they're able to be comfortable. So it is. One of the reasons that the U.S. is so successful is because we've had such a great ability to feed our population, and for our population to be comfortable. They're warm during the winter, they're cool during the summer, and they can be highly productive because of that.
It's crazy. Yep. Like the reason heart disease is the number one killer in the U.S. is not because meat is bad. It's because whether it's good, it's not a good thing that people die of heart disease, and that's the number one killer. But it's just a testament to the fact, like, hey, we have food in such an abundance and such abundance and affordable that it is very easy to eat yourself to, like, quote unquote, eat yourself to death in this country.
Oh, you definitely could.
Like,
I guess there's people that do.
For thousands of years, the only people who have had that luxury are rulers and incredibly, incredibly wealthy people. it's only in the past 150 years that people have not had to work for their own food that they eat. It is absolutely crazy how far we have come since the Industrial Revolution and the invention of a machine like the tractor. Like, we have it so easy, guys. Like, so easy. We were talking today, it was -40 wind chill in Iowa last week, and I was plowing snow. I was telling my brother-in-law, you know, we were sitting in my truck after getting these machines started. It took forever in the cold, and so our hands were freezing. We're like sitting in my nice warm truck. It was just keeping us warm. And I was like, David, 100 years ago, we would have just lost our hands to frostbite. They would have just been gone. Like, we either lose our hands or we just die, because we would have no other option other than to survive. We don't have to think about things like that anymore. It's crazy. I told my wife the same thing. I was like, listen, like, I want to have a wood-burning stove, not because I'm some major conspiracy theorist and I think the grid's going to go down, but I'm like, there could be a possibility one day where we could not have gas or power for some reason, whatever it may be, and we would not be able to heat ourselves. And she's like, well, we just go over to someone else's house. It's like, they don't have a wood stove either. Like, that's not, like, you know, there's just like that, there's a lack of grit in today's society that, like, man, sometimes I'm like, maybe we need something to happen just to give us a good reminder. We have it way too good. A
good wake-up call. Yeah, if you think about the pioneers that set across this country, and they didn't have shelter, they didn't have, you know, the only food they had was what they could wag with them, because they hadn't set up a society to be able to grow food yet. Mm-hmm. So they had to come across this land that's very harsh in our weather and overcome all these hardships to, you know, to eventually hope to get some semblance of a life. Mm-hmm. And it is amazing that those people survived through all the trials and hardships. They survived and made it to the destination that they were headed. Mm-hmm. That is the American. When men were men. Well, that's definitely when men were men.
Yeah, when men were men, and there was still wild left in the world. You know, there's very few places you can go in modern America where you are at risk of dying from the things out there, and the places that is like, you know, suburb Chicago, like St. Louis, you know.
Yeah, now
it's not the wilderness.
Yeah, now it's a stray bullet from gang violence that gets you dead, not a grizzly bear that ate you, or a blizzard that stranded you and snowed you in, and you didn't have any ability to get out of it.
It's crazy, that mindset, though. I was thinking about that after I finished this last book. I was like, man, like, the idea of manifest destiny and the idea that America needs to colonize the rest of America and all the good and bad that went with that, like, that ideology of settling the rest of the country has so determined how we are as a society today and where we are as a country. Like, that, I'm gonna go do it, and I'm gonna go do it, and I'm gonna have to figure it out, and I'm going to be entrepreneurial. I'm going to make things like that has carried throughout our country's legacy for like 200 years now. And like, I can 100% look back 200 years ago and look at these pioneers going out and settling, these original farmers and ranchers settling the entire country. I'm like, oh, that mindset that they were instilled of through Manifest Destiny has basically developed the entire U.S.'s like view of the world and our economy and global economies. Is like, we're just going to keep doing it, and we're going to keep figuring it out. And like, that spirit has remained strong for so long now. And I think that's part of the reason we had this great land that we ended up upon, and we pushed a bunch of people and killed a bunch of people to get it. And we also were told, settle it all, it's yours now. You know, it's crazy. Like, last little bit of imperialism. Love it, hate it. It has propelled the U.S. into a place that every other country in the world still envies.
Sure, it has. And I was talking to a young person last week, and, you know, he was asking about some of the things I saw different between when I first started my career versus what I see now. And, you know, to me, like, as you're in a developed country, the more development that comes, the more difficult it is for you to get off the ground with your individual startup business, just because at the beginning of a developing country's life, all these industries are in their infancy, and there's not the amount of capital out there, versus once an industry or an area has become completely established and you've had other business owners there for a period of time over the course of, maybe a decade or several decades of working that business, well, they've built their capital supply up. So it's a lot more difficult to compete against a business that's already set up and developed in a fully developed country versus setting a business up and running one that's in a developing economy where you're competing against a other young business, versus you're competing against an established business that's been there for 35 years. Mm-hmm. So I think the biggest thing that I've seen over the course of my career is it's just harder now because of those factors. We're living in a completely developed society, and with that development, there has been people that are doing what you want to do, for the last 50 years, and they've been able to, through grit and hard work, establish a large amount of wealth. And with that wealth, they leverage it to make it harder for you to succeed, because they can lower the price of their product to make sure they have the lowest priced product on the market, and probably a product that's equally as good. They can just produce it cheaper because they've been in the game longer.
Mm-hmm.
So as a startup, it is a difficult, it can be a difficult task to start a business in a fully developed country. That all being said, it's not that it can't be done.
Yeah, that's been going on for 100 years now. I mean, back in the big cattle boom and the cattle bust, the big four meat packers, the big meat packers in Chicago, anytime someone would try to open an extra processing facility or open something outside of their control, well, they would just slash their prices and beat everyone on price, because it's like, well, we're so big, we can eat this cost a heck. It's a game of, I can last longer than you can. So anyone being like, oh man, like, we live in such a dystopian society, all these rich companies control everything. It's like, guys, it's nothing new. Like, businesses have been doing this for hundreds of years. It's just now it's the company that makes your iPhone or ships your packages. It's not the meat packers. You still got to worry about meat packers, but yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things. Society. Yeah, we are kind of at a more developed point than we ever have been before. But we've also been saying that for hundreds of years. Like, oh man, we have made it so far. We've done all this. People probably before the internet were like, oh man, we are so developed. Like, we're stable. Things are great. Like, we figure things out. Internet shows up. Everyone just and you look at the early days of the internet. There were people who in the first decade of the internet made millions upon millions of dollars. Guess how many people kept those millions and millions of dollars after that? Only a handful. Do you know why? Because speculative market grew, .com bubble happens, all these things just crater. The people who played their cards well and planned for that knew, hey, this isn't going to last forever. We should probably have an actual business strategy behind that. And it happens with every industry. There's super high highs, and as soon as there's a super high high, there's going to be lows. So, yeah, I don't know where we're going with that.
Well, but that shows you, like, we do have some disadvantages in being super developed, but like you're talking about now, the internet, that brings a whole new avenue of revenue to you. Basically, a worldwide ability to market to the consumer, versus before you were just either in your local or regional market. I mean, it was very hard to grow outside of that, where now, with the right logistics and the right website, you can reach customer across the ocean. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it should open up. A developed country does, create some difficulty, but it also opens up a value too. So I guess, I mean, what do you say? I mean, I'm very thankful to live in our country, in America.
Yeah. We have it so easy. I think about that all the time. That we've been, I didn't grow up with a family with money or anything by any means. I was raised by a single mother, but like I look back, I'm like, man, even then we still had it so good compared to, if you've ever traveled out of the country to anywhere that's not a developed country, like you realize, oh shoot, like we have so much stuff and so much junk that like most people around the world, a large population of the world, like just looks at the U.S. and they don't care about any of the, developed countries like Europe and Canada look at the U.S. and say, you're horrible. How could you do those things? Your country's falling apart. You go anywhere else in the world, man. The people who I have messaged me on Instagram saying, we love U.S. farms. I'd love to be in the U.S. I'd love to live there. Like, guys, you know why we have like an immigrant crisis in the U.S., quote unquote? It's because people really want to be here because it's a really great place to live the American dream that has been touted. It's like, hey, like you can work minimum wage here and you will make better money here than you will in like probably 80% of the world. Like the X billion amount of people who live on this planet, India's got 1 billion of them, China's got another 1 billion of them, Africa's got another couple 100 million of them. The U.S. and Europe, which are like the primarily developed places in the world, are very like they're like a less than like 1/7% or 1/7 of the entire world population. We've got it good, guys.
We do. It is a phenomenal country to live in, and I mean, yeah, we have our problems, but yeah, when you look at the at the developing countries and and you see the hardships that those people go through. It makes you very thankful to live in the U.S. And, Clayton and I were talking about this on the way up here, too. We have, like what, like you see bannered around the news and is the immigrant problem that we're having, or the migrant problem that we're having in America. And at this point, we've got, I don't know how many millions of people have come in here over the last 20 years, but these people are not U.S. citizens at this point. And they cannot contribute to our society tax-wise. They can only be a burden. But if we would just sit down and patriate these people so that they can be citizens at some point, like you don't have to make them citizens overnight, but give them a path to citizenship. And I know the people that have done it the right way are going to say, hey, but it took me 7 years to get that green card. Look, I'm sorry it took you 7 years to get the green card, but we have got to do something about all these people that are inside of our economy that are working on a black market economy. The U.S. government is not getting any benefit from those people being here. They're being a net loss overall, because they're taking services, but they're not paying back into the system. And if we patriated them, if we gave them ability to be registered and to pay tax, those people are willing to pay taxes. They want to be here. They want to participate in our society.
Yeah, guys, this country was built on immigration, and that's another really awesome way to stimulate economies, is actually to bring more labor in, to create more market, to create more demand, for things. That is a good thing pretty much all around. And I always hear these things touted like, oh, terrorism in the U.S., oh, they're going to ruin our society. It's like, guys, I grew up in California. I worked for an excavation company with 40 Mexicans, and it was awesome. They are, no joke, some of the nicest people I have ever worked with. Our country would collapse without the illegal labor that is in this country.
I mean, how long have you been, since 2001, how long have you heard terrorism? I mean, I know that there is terrorist attacks occasionally and that we have some that slip through the cracks, but overall, these people that are coming into this land are looking for a better life. And, I mean, at this point they're here and we're not sending them out. So why don't we just allow them to come into the economy? And I know if you're a Republican or if you're a Democrat, you're saying, well, they wouldn't vote for my side, or they wouldn't vote for my side. Well, how do you know what side they were going to vote for? You could say generally they would be X or Y, but you don't really know for sure once that person comes into the economy who they're going to vote for or what they're going to think. And they're here. So, at this point they're here. What are we going to do about it? And we can't, we're not going to now deport 10 million individuals. I mean, for one thing, it's not possible. It's not feasible. We don't even have a workforce capable of doing it. Mm-hmm. So what option are we left with besides just registering them and giving them some type of path to citizenship?
Yeah.
And ultimately, I mean, at that point, they're citizens too. So, and this is the great thing about America. Like, hey, I might not want the exact thing as the guy that just immigrated here 2 years ago, but if he's a citizen and I'm a citizen, then we have to work together, or we have to vote against each other to get the thing that we went through passed, or the elective representative that we want represented us elected. We have to do that through voting or getting out there and doing grassroots. And ultimately, none of this stuff happens very fast in America, with so many different voices and so much different power. Legislation happens over years and not days and months. Mm-hmm. So it's a very long process getting anything passed through that is going to change demographics, or it's going to change industry. Any of these things doesn't happen overnight. So it's not like we put these people on a path to citizenship and our country gets changed overnight. No, that's mm-hmm. not the right way to think about it. Our country will change over time, but it's more like that crab in boiling water, or whatever you want to say. It's going to happen over a slow period of time, and you have so many different factors coming in from so many different directions. Mm-hmm. You're not going to have one side win out over the other. So let's do something about our immigration policy that's sensible and let these people in. And I mean, I know a lot of people are going to argue with me about that, but that's my point on it.
I've been very open about this for a long time, just because I have worked alongside the people that, no offense, Republicans, you guys have been kind of jerks to, for a decent chunk of my career, and I am yet to find something that's the right has told me to believe about these people that actually be true. It's one of those things. I look at our U.S. economy. I look at, first of all, the amount of agricultural labor we need in the U.S., the amount of infrastructure labor. I mean, we're getting fiber internet trenched into our entire city right now. That project is being entirely run by Hispanic folks. Probably not did not grow up in the U.S. And you know what? They're doing an awesome job. We have been asking for better internet for years, and they're the only ones actually willing to do that work out in the muddy, cold, year-round. Like, guys, like, we not only should be open and accepting, I think we do need to have good policy. We need to be able to do this correctly. We need to do this well. Building a wall and saying everyone stay out is not actually going to solve a problem. It's just they're going to come. Yeah, all that to say, I don't know.
You're right. They're going to get, like, you could build a wall across the border and, like, shoot people as they come up to it. They're still going to come in. Uh-huh. They're going to come in by boat. They're going to come in by tunnel. They're going to come in by plane. They're going to come in somehow. It's just showing you that you live in an awesome country and that people want to be here.
Amen.
Ultimately, they're not all terrorists. They are. They're looking to terrorize the cash register at Dollar General by working there every day. Uh-huh. I mean, seriously. I mean, these people are willing workers, and they look. At the end of the day, we as Americans think that we're too good to do certain jobs. Now, I personally do not. I feel like I will jump in there and do about anything. But there is, sadly, a portion of our population that thinks they're too good for certain jobs. And that portion of the population is still needed to do those hard jobs. And if they're not willing to do it, we need somebody that is. And then we have this big group of willing workers there, but we can't use them because there's a system put in place where you have to put the people's credentials in there. And, ultimately, if they don't have credentials and immigration comes up, then your business is fine for hiring them, So we have to have some common sense policies. And ultimately, I think this falls in the politicians' lap. They've prevented this from happening because of, they've polarized both sides to the point where nothing can get done on this fact. And the news media is it's laying at their feet more than anybody's. But let's get some common sense immigration policy going and get these people in our economy so they can then pay taxes and they can help shoulder the burden of this infrastructure deal that we got. They can help share the burden of the labor. And if nothing else, just think how many people have dreamed that are living here about being American citizens. I mean, you are making somebody's life and their kids' future lives better just through legislation. I mean, you don't get that opportunity very often. And I know this is another thing where we're going to get yelled at probably, but
told you this might not have been a good idea.
Hey, we got to talk about more things than just farming each and every day. I mean, ultimately,
there's one thing I know about us folks in the U.S. We're experts on everything, and our opinion is valid on everything.
Well, I'm going to tell you mine regardless of whether you like it or not. And, I drive my dad crazy because my dad is, he's very conservative, and I consider myself a conservative too, but I like to think of myself as like a common sense where I know that my way of thinking is not always right. There's always a different perspective or a different scenario that, lends to each situation. So just because of the way I think about things doesn't necessarily make them correct, and vice versa. There's so many different trains of thought, and that's what makes America great, is the mixing pot of everybody together and everybody's ideals, and we all having to work through them, through long-term lobbying and long-term getting the thoughts out there to the public so that they can then decide which way we want to move with this, and ultimately it's good for society. So, how long have we been doing this for?
A while. I'm tired.
Okay, so we're both tired.
What was that big thing over there that was spitting flame in the air? Do you know? Was that a coal plant?
I didn't see it.
It was like a big industrial plant, lots of steam everywhere. And
I'm getting to the point I'm so tired. All I can see is a semi in front of me. So, we're going to cut this off here. We appreciate you joining us for another episode of the Agriculture Podcast. And, hey, we appreciate you listening. Like, share, and subscribe.
Yeah, we'll have something farm-related next week, probably. We'll see. Thanks for listening, guys. Sleep tight. It's 8:37 here. It's about Neil and I's bedtime, so. All right.